Thanks.
You're welcome.
My name's Carl. I'm an alcoholic. Good to see you, Lieutenant. She hates it when I say that. That's why I said it. I'm going to talk about fear. I moved to Salt Lake with my mother when I was 5 years old. I was born in Cuba. Castro came to power, moved to Miami, moved to Atlantic City, New Jersey, Manhattan, Chicago, Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Ended up in Salt Lake, and my mother was broke. I have no idea who my father is. And my mother was a bartender. And she got a job at a bar called the Cotton Bottom. Some of you may be aware of it. I'm pretty sure most of you are aware of it. And I am going to talk about garlic burgers. We lived behind it in a little white house. And in 1962, there was the Bay of Pigs. And up to that point, when you're in kindergarten and first grade stuff, and it's, especially when you get a new kid that comes into town, they want to know where you're from, what you do. And of course, I was really cool because I was from Cuba. And then Bay of Pigs. I got beat up. I got ostracized. And it was bad enough that my mother was smart enough to transfer me to another school. And I never told anybody that I was born in Cuba until I was in college, because I was scared to death. And so you got some history. Fear comes early to childhood, and some of it hangs on. I also stuttered. Fast forward 14, my mother got married. Marriage brought 2 older brothers, and then she had 2 younger brothers. We still lived in that same house. There was 5 boys in a 3-bedroom house, 1 bathroom, behind the Cotton Bottom. And when I got 14, my mother said, "We're not buying any school clothes anymore. You have to get a job." Okay, I have no idea where to get a job. She says, "Well, I have a job for you. It's called washing dishes and making the ingredients for garlic burgers at the Cotton Bottom." And so you folks that have been to the Cotton Bottom for Crown Burgers, most of them were made by me. And I can tell you what the ingredients are, and I will never, ever have a Crown Burger, not a Crown Burger, but a garlic burger from the Cotton Bottom ever again. And I recommend you don't, because I know what goes in it. 14 years old, that's when I had my first drink. My older brother was 2 years older than me, and some of you that are familiar with the Salt Lake Valley, Draper at that time was basically mink farms and dairy farms. And Draper had, I think, a stop sign. That was it. There was no suburbs. There was no Smiths. There was nothing. Mink farms, and it stunk. But in the middle of town, there was this little pavilion. And in the summertime, on every Friday and Saturday night, they had these dances. And so my brother, for some reason, drugged me along one Friday night. And we went out to the pavilion. There was this great rock band playing. And there was these kids that were dancing, and they were having a good time. And I wanted to dance, but I couldn't. I couldn't ask somebody to dance. I was scared. And I was in a panic. I was almost shaking. Brother sees what's going on. He says, why don't you ask somebody to dance? I say, I can't do it. Okay, let's go out to the parking lot. Go out to the parking lot with my brother and his buddies. We pass around a bottle of Jim Beam. And we smoke a joint. And when that bourbon went down my throat, I didn't cough, I didn't hack. I loved the smell of it. I loved the taste of it. I loved the burn of it. And about 60 seconds later, I could feel it running through my bloodstream, and it hit my head. And from then on, it was a chase for that feeling. Back out to the dance floor. Pardon me, I'm cutting in here. It was that smooth. I didn't stutter. And I danced, and I got sweaty, and I had fun. And we went back out to the parking lot, and we passed that bottle of Jim Beam around, smoked another joint, back out to the dance floor, and by God, I was John Travolta. Back out to the car, pass around the Jim Beam, smoke another joint. Back out to the dance floor. Now I'm giving lessons. Thankfully, that was in 1969, and we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have video cameras at that time because, thinking that I was either Fred Astaire or John Travolta, my brother told me later on, that, Carl, you really look like a dying chicken. But that stuck with me. That comfort, that confidence. And from that point on, I could not ask a girl out for a date unless I was drunk. Everything I had to do with fear, whiskey was the cure. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of my teachers. I was afraid of my parents. I was afraid of dating. I was afraid of success. No. I don't know what that was, but it was weird. And so I drank. And I did well in school. I was a nerd. I wanted to be the athlete, but I was 5'6" and maybe 105 pounds. And so I hung out with the math kids, and I liked math. It was logical. It didn't talk back, and it was comforting. I could do it alone, and I got good grades, and I went to high school, and then I went to college. I had a stint in the military, and when I graduated from college, went to a private Christian school, got a degree in theology and philosophy. And by the way, I'm an atheist. Well, you got to argue the points, right? So you better know what you're talking about rather than just spouting off that I don't believe in God. So that's what I got my degree in. When I graduated, I didn't know what I was going to do. And there was a career fair. I should see better without my glasses for some reason. And I thought about State Department, I thought about government, I thought about this, I thought about that, maybe IBM. There was this one little booth And frankly, I don't know how I graduated from college because I drank every day. And Jim Beam, Johnny Walker, those are my brothers. And so anyway, I come to this one little booth, and they're hiring to go to Europe on a 5-year contract, and also to pay for my grad school. And so I asked about it. It was a pretty large consulting company, in fact, largest consulting company in the world. And I asked, well, what am I going to be doing? They said, well, you're going to be in a van, and you're going to be running around Europe interviewing vineyards, distilleries, and brewery owners about how to export that business model to the United States. I said, do you mean I'm going to be at a distillery or a brewery or a vineyard every day? Yes. Yes. I am doing this. This is the job for me. I get to get paid to drink. So off I went. By that time, my stepfather had joined AA, and so I knew a little bit about it. And actually, he turned out to be a fairly nice guy. And one evening, I was in Cortina and blacked out. Woke up the next morning, laying in a pile of vomit in my bed, and had no idea where my colleagues were. Had no idea what the next town was supposed to be, and I do not speak Italian. I do not know what to do. So I do what any good alcoholic does, is I threw all my clothes away, called down to the front desk and said, I need a new set of clothes. This is what I wear. This is my size. An hour later, came to the room, new set of clothes, and immediately went down to the bar and started drinking again. And it dawned on me that I was going to get fired. And I was going to get kicked out of grad school because they were intertwined. And so I called my stepdad. Now you're thinking that I'm at my bottom, right? No, I am not at my bottom. I'm thinking, here's the story I can tell my boss. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going to get into recovery, and I'll save my job. And that's what I did. My dad sent me a letter with all the AA groups in Paris, which is where I was going to school at the time. And there was one right next to the college. And I walked in and said, my name's Carl, and I'm an alcoholic. And I didn't believe one bit of it. There's two ways to do the steps wrong, I found out. One is not to do them, and the other one is to lie. I did the latter. Didn't believe in step 1, didn't believe in step 2, didn't believe in step 3. We got to step 4. Oh yeah, here's my defects, here's my problems, here's who I'm resenting, this is my sex inventory, which is really pretty good, dude. Step 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, here's my list. About a half a page. A month later, step 9, yeah, all done. 10, 11, 12. Did that for close to 5 years. Job ended, grad school ended, and I didn't want to leave Europe. I loved Europe. I loved the skiing. I loved the women. The only thing I did correctly, the only thing that I was actually good at is during that 5 years of deceit was I did not get a sponsee. I was asked to sponsor a few guys, but there was something in the back of my mind saying, no, I have nothing to offer anybody. I cannot do that. I cannot take somebody through the steps because I'm not doing that. Couldn't find a job in Europe. Didn't want to come back to the United States and definitely did not want to come back to Utah. New York, LA, Chicago, Detroit, well, maybe not Detroit. But definitely didn't want to come back to Utah, and they gave me a one-way ticket back to Salt Lake City. They dropped me off at the airport, checked my luggage in, and made a beeline to the bar. And drank. And drank for the next 7 years. Came back to Salt Lake, drunk. Parents picked me up, moved in with my parents. Pretty good bank account, nowhere to go, had no idea what to do. So I went to the Cotton Bottom and the Canyon Inn and Green Street and Wasatch Front and a lot of other bars all over this town. Got a job at the Salt Lake Tribune as a newspaper reporter. That didn't last long because of my drinking. Got a job as a cop at the Salt Lake City Police Department. A year later, transferred to the Attorney General's office, and which is really odd because my primary job was to investigate treatment centers. And I put a lot of CEOs in jail and in prison. So I was not real fond of treatment centers. On August 3rd, 1989, I got a phone call from that same consulting company. By the way, I had gotten married a doctor. Oh yeah, this is good. I asked her to marry me in a blackout. I woke up the next morning. We were in Denver, where her parents lived. She went to school in Denver, and she's running around the house, she's making a list and she's doing this. She's all happy, and she says, who do you think we should invite to the wedding? I'm not supposed to swear. I'm in a church, so I won't. And played it cool, because that's what we do. We alcoholics, when we black out, we're all wondering inside, who did I insult? Who is this person next to me? Where's my car? Et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm just quiet. I'm not saying anything. I did not tell my wife until 20 years later. I asked her to marry me in a blackout. Anyway, August 3rd, this consulting company called me and said, do you want to go to Alaska for a 5-year contract? Doing what? Well, you live in a little village called Fort Yukon, and there's 14 tribes and another 12 tribes on the Tanana River and another 10 tribes on the Kotzebue. And we have a contract with the federal government and the state of Alaska to see if these tribes want to be brought into the 20th century. So your job is your team is to do that analysis and get the funding. And before I even talked to my wife about it, I said yes. And then I told my wife about it. Fortunately, she was in. She saw an opportunity that she was not having at the place she was working, which was at Primary Children's Hospital at the time. And we had a nice house, we had a BMW, we had a Subaru, and a golden retriever in the backyard. And I was drunk. So I said yes to this company, and I knew I was an alcoholic. That was the downside about going through some AA on a consistent basis for 5 years, is I got all this information about the steps, about the traditions, about staying sober, about serenity and joy and spirituality and et cetera, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was drinking with all this information in the back of my head. And I remember somewhere in that summer I was sitting in my car in the front of a liquor store, pounding on the steering wheel, pounding on the dashboard, crying before it opened, half hour before it opened, knowing that I was going to go into the store and buy a fifth of bourbon, knowing that I shouldn't do it, didn't want to do it, but couldn't stop. Knew that I was an alcoholic and knew what the friggin' answer was. And I didn't do it. So on August 4th, I walked into the Alamo Club. Said, my name's Carl and I'm an alcoholic and I'm going to Alaska. A lot of the folks that came up behind me said, well, this is your first day of sobriety. You probably shouldn't be going to Alaska so soon. Now I'm going. So I didn't get a sponsor until I got up to Alaska. And fortunately, that job entailed that I spent a lot of time in Anchorage, Juneau, and Washington, D.C. So my home group is the Glacier Group in Anchorage, Alaska. And we moved up there in November. As soon as I got into that meeting, I got a sponsor, and that sponsor is my sponsor to this day. Sobriety date's August 4th, 1989. It's been my sponsor since November 1989. My grand sponsor, same guy until last week, and he passed away. Very, very lucky. And one of the first things he taught me right off the very bat, two things. He sat me down. We were at a Denny's in Anchorage. He says, are you willing to do anything to get sober? And I said, no. He says, well, the traditional answer is yes. Well, you got to remember, I'm in love with math. I'm in love with logic. Anything means anything. I said, Paul, I'm not going to rob a bank to stay sober. I'm not going to crawl on my knees down the block, rolling a little ball to stay sober. Give me the booze. He says, okay. No one's going to ask you to do anything illegal. No one's going to ask you to do anything immoral. No one's going to ask you to do anything unethical. It will be reasonable. What we're going to ask you to do is to go through the steps. What we're going to ask you to do is chair a meeting. We're going to ask you maybe to be a secretary. That was actually tested about 3 months later. And Paul said, if any of that stuff happens, let me know and I'll take care of it. 3 months later, this guy, we're in a meeting, and he comes up to me and he wants me to give him $3,000 and have sex with him. He says, well, you're new, right? I said, yeah. He says, well, you'll do anything to stay sober, right? I said, no. I won't. $3,000 is sex with you? I'm heading to the bar. I can always come back tomorrow. Told my sponsor about it. And that guy was not in that meeting ever again. Never saw him again. And the other thing he taught me, and I've said this in a few other meetings before, Paul sat me down and he says, Carl, AA is not group therapy. It's not a place to find a date. It's not a place to get married. It's not a place to get laid. And it's not workforce development. Now, those things might happen, and they do, but that is not the purpose. He says, Carl, the purpose here is to tell your experience, strength, and hope, and to help another alcoholic stay sober. That's our purpose, period. End of story. That's it. I said, well, so I jumped in. And, I know there's not, we heard, in what Jeff was talking about, there's no authority, there's no president of AA. Well, I disagreed with that. I thought there should be a president of AA, and I thought I should be it. And I wanted every service position that there was. I wanted to chair all the meetings. I wanted to be the secretary, the treasurer. I wanted to do it all. Central office rep, eventually Area 2 delegate. Went to New York City with two things on my mind. One was to have the chapter We Agnostics removed from the big book. I read We Agnostics, and I immediately cut it out. The other one was in the Appendix 1. We've all heard this, and it's a really, really good quote, and it's a really good idea to live by. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. I'd heard that before. And I looked at the author, and it says Herbert Spencer, and I went, no, Herbert Spencer didn't write that. And he didn't. I said, William Pauley wrote that. Herbert Spencer was famous. He coined the phrase survival of the fittest. He was a Darwinist. So I'm going to New York to have that changed. I'd been in AA about 7 years at that point, and the book still has Herbert Spencer, by the way. I'm hoping the 5th edition has the actual author. But I didn't have any sponsees. It was 7 years. The first 7 years I was in sobriety. I didn't have any real sobriety. I didn't have any sponsees. And I asked Paul one day, I said, no one's ever asked me to be their sponsor. And he goes, yeah, I know. And no one should. And I said, well, why not? He goes, well, you're arrogant, you're pompous, and you're bombastic. You're a know-it-all? I said, well, yeah, what's the problem? He goes, no one wants what you have. I said, well, what do I do about that? He says, you sit down and you shut up. You don't chair any more meetings. Quit all your service positions. And you sit in the back and you don't say a word. And I want you to do that for a year. So I did. 2 days after that year, I went back to the front room and I was asked to share. And I shared. And what I shared on was something I learned over that year that was my sponsor was trying to grill into my head for that first 7 years, and it was this. And I'll leave you with this. And it's what I live by, or I try to live by. Oh, before I get there, Sharon gave me a book told me about a book to read about a year ago, and I had one of my sponsees read it as well. It's called The Way of Integrity by an author by the name of Martha Beck. And it changed her life. She said, it might change yours. It's one of those self-help books, and I've never read a self-help book, ever. But I'm going to read it, so I read it. And it has these exercises throughout the book. And one of them is to not lie unconditionally. I mean, no white lies. When someone says, how you doing, you tell the truth. We all say, yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Some of us have got the flu, and we say, I'm doing well. Over that week, I tried it. I failed. I could not tell the 100% truth for even 1 week. These are the lies I told. I'm almost there. It must have got to my spam folder, sorry. My phone died. No, I don't pee in the shower. It really wasn't that expensive. I'm almost finished. I remember you. It's not you, it's me. I'm good, thanks. I've got plans. I can't make it. Little lies that we tell each other, and what Martha Beck, it changed her life, and I still can't do it. I was, when Eric asked me to speak tonight, my initial reaction was no. And he said, well, I'll take you to dinner to Stella's. And I said, okay. Sounds good. I will speak for food. That's what I'm going to leave you with. And one of the things, it's a companion to the 12 steps. And we all hear about it. Go to meetings, meter makers make it, keep coming back, ad nauseum. We hear that all the time. We get tired of hearing it, and then we start saying it. And so we have these 12 spiritual principles. I like to think of them as 12 morals. Honesty, hope, surrender, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, charity, responsibility, discipline, awareness, and service. That is who my higher power is. And if I can, on a daily basis, hit 6 of those, I'm doing pretty good. If I can hit 2 of them, I'm doing okay. If I hit 1, I can survive. My name's Carl, and I'm an alcoholic. Thanks for letting me share.